August 1944. Normandy, France. 2 months after the D-Day landings, the Allies had fought their way through the treacherous hedgerows, but the German army, though battered, was still a formidable force. What happened next would become one of the most decisive and dramatic chapters of the Battle of Normandy. The story of the Falaise pocket, where an entire German army group found itself staring into the abyss of total annihilation. After the breakout from the Normandy beachhead, spearheaded by the American success in Operation Cobra, the Allied front line began to move with startling speed. General Patton's Third Army was racing across France, hooking south and then east, threatening to encircle the bulk of the German forces still fighting in Normandy. German High Command, however, saw an opportunity. They believed they could cut off Patton's spearhead at its base, near Mortain, and drive a wedge all the way to the coast, splitting the Allied armies in two. This was Operation Luttich, a desperate, high-stakes gamble. Hitler himself ordered the attack, pulling together his last panzer reserves for the push. On August 7th, under the cover of fog, four Panzer divisions struck the American 30th Infantry Division at Mortain. The fighting was ferocious. The Americans were outnumbered, but they held their ground with incredible tenacity, especially the Lost Battalion on Hill 314, who held out for 6 days, surrounded and under constant attack, directing artillery fire that decimated the German columns. But the German gamble was backfiring spectacularly. By committing their last mobile reserves to this westward attack, they had unknowingly pushed their heads deeper into a noose that was rapidly tightening. The Allied commanders, Bradley and Montgomery, saw the bigger picture. While the Germans were fixated on Mortain, the Canadians and Poles were pushing south from Caen, and the Americans were swinging north from Le Mans. The gap between the two Allied pincers was shrinking by the hour. The town of Falaise was the northern jaw of the trap. Argentan was the southern. Between them lay the entire German 7th Army and the 5th Panzer Army. For the German soldiers on the ground, the situation was becoming terrifyingly clear. They had been ordered to attack west, but now their escape route to the east was vanishing. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, the German commander in the west, pleaded with Hitler for permission to withdraw, but the Führer, fixated on the Mortain counterattack, refused. By the time the order to retreat was finally given, it was almost too late. The retreat was chaos. A massive conglomeration of men, tanks, trucks, horse-drawn carts, and artillery pieces clogged the few roads leading east. They were funneling into a rapidly closing gap, a corridor of death about 15 miles wide. Allied air power, now masters of the sky, rained down a torrent of bombs and rockets. Fighter bombers, the dreaded Chambois, hunted with impunity, turning the roads into scrapyards of twisted metal and burning vehicles. One pilot described it as a turkey shoot. The ground fighting was just as brutal. The Canadians and Poles fought their way south with dogged determination, capturing Falaise on August 16th. To the south, the Americans had reached Argentan. However, a gap still remained between them. This gap, between the towns of Trun, Chambois, and Montormel, became the last desperate escape route for tens of thousands of German soldiers. Why wasn't it closed sooner? This has been a subject of historical debate for decades. General Patton was eager to push his troops north and slam the door shut completely, but he was ordered to halt by his superior, General Bradley. Bradley was concerned about friendly fire incidents with the advancing Canadians and wanted to maintain a clear line of command. While cautious, this decision allowed thousands of Germans to escape the initial encirclement. But for those still inside, the pocket was becoming a cauldron. The Poles, in a heroic and crucial action, captured Hill 262, a commanding height known as the Mace that overlooked the last escape route near Chambois. For 3 days, the Polish 1st Armored Division was surrounded and cut off, fighting desperately against relentless attacks from both inside and outside the pocket. They held on, though their ammunition ran low and their casualties were severe. Their stand was critical in sealing the fate of the Germans trapped below. A German army doctor trapped in the pocket later wrote of the absolute horror. The constant shelling, the dive bombing, the smell of death hanging over the entire area. He described the roads as being littered with the dead and dying, a horrifying mix of men and horses. The entire valley floor was a graveyard of equipment. It was, in his words, hell on earth. The landscape was so choked with wreckage that it became impossible to drive. Men had to abandon their vehicles and flee on foot, running a gauntlet of artillery and machine gun fire. By August 21st, the gap was finally closed when Canadian and Polish forces linked up with the Americans in Chambois. The Battle of the Falaise Pocket was over. The results were staggering. While estimates vary, it's believed that around 10,000 German soldiers were killed and a staggering 50,000 were taken prisoner. The material losses were even more immense. Virtually all of the heavy equipment of two entire German armies was lost. Tanks, artillery pieces, and thousands of vehicles were left abandoned or destroyed. The Falaise Pocket was an unmitigated disaster for the German army in the West. It was the decisive end of the Battle of Normandy. The forces that had so tenaciously defended France for over 2 months were effectively shattered. There was no longer a coherent defensive line. The road to Paris was wide open, and the Allies surged forward, liberating the French capital just days later on August 25th. The battle had been a bloody, brutal affair, a testament to the courage of the Allied soldiers who closed the trap and the desperation of those caught within it. It remains one of the most complete and devastating encirclements of the Second World War, a turning point that hastened the end of the conflict in Europe. Thank you so much for watching. The story of the Falaise Pocket is a powerful reminder of the immense scale and human cost of the Second World War. If you found this history interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories from the past. Let us know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to cover next. We'll see you in the next video.